Okay, welcome to Parallelograms today. We are going to look at our objective. It is to know and classify a parallelogram by its attributes. We're going to do our notes. So you need to have your notes in front of you for lesson 17, attributes of parallelograms. Okay. If you notice at the top, it says, remember, an attribute is a characteristic of a two-dimensional shape. Okay? We are going to look at what makes a parallelogram a parallelogram. And those things, the definition of a parallelogram, are also its attributes. Okay? What makes it a parallelogram. So it says draw a parallelogram. We already did that for you on the notes. Okay? And it even labeled two of the angles. You've got an 80-degree angle and a 100-degree angle. Okay? What do we know about an 80-degree angle? It is less than 90, which means it's an acute angle. So I'm actually going to put an A for acute. Okay? And 100 degrees is more than a 90-degree angle, more than 90 degrees. So I'm going to put an O for obtuse. All right, so what we need to know about a parallelogram is that the opposite angles, we need to know what those are. Opposite means not across from. These would be across from angles, right? But opposite means this angle across, opposite, to the other corner diagonally across from it. Okay? Those are opposite angles. The opposite angles on a parallelogram need to be equal. So, for this demo, for this illustration here, we're going to show that these two angles need to be equal. Okay? So if this one over here is 80, this one over here must be 80. Okay? Which also means if this one over here is 100, the one opposite it, or down the diagonal, is also going to be 100. Okay? Opposite angles must be equal. All right? So that's our first attribute of a parallelogram. So I'm going to write that right over here. Opposite angles must be equal. I'll make that black so you guys can see it. Thanks for bearing with me. Nope, didn't make it black. There we go, now it's black. Okay. So opposite angles must be equal. What attributes do you need to include to make the drawing a parallelogram? All right, so we need the opposite angles must be equal, right? We also need this side for a parallelogram to be parallel with this side, and this side to be parallel with this side. Opposite sides must be parallel, all right? So we're going to put that in that section. Opposite sides must be parallel. Okay? And we also need total angles to equal 360 degrees. And that's because there are 4 corners in a parallelogram, and they must equal 360 degrees. So I'm also going to put opposite angles must be equal. Can you read all of that? Perfect. So what attributes do you need to include to make the drawing parallel? You need opposite sides must be parallel, total angles equal 360 degrees, and opposite angles must be equal. Okay, so we're going to see if the following are these following quadrilaterals, they're quadrilaterals because they have 4 sides, okay, if they are also parallelograms. So we need to check, are opposite sides parallel? Well, this side looks to be parallel to this side, and this side looks to be parallel to, the base looks parallel to the top, okay? We could measure and see if the distance between here and here is the same as here and here. That would let us know if it was going to eventually cross or not. But that looks check, okay? The opposite angles, we can tell right off the bat, opposite angles must be equal. Well, this one's 60 and this one's 60. This one's 115 and opposite it is 115. So that's a check. All right, but let's try to add them up, which will be 115 plus 115. I'm going to have to erase because I am writing really big. Let's do 115 plus 115, and that's going to get us 230, and then 60 plus 60 is going to equal 120. So I'm just going to add 230 plus the 60 plus 60, which was 120. Zero, 5, 3. Ooh, what was it supposed to be? 360, and we only have 350 degrees. So this cannot be a parallelogram. All right, so we would say no. And I'm going to write that in red. Even though it looks like a parallelogram, it is not a parallelogram. All right, so let's move down to the second one. All right, again, let's go through our list. Opposite sides must be parallel. Well, they look parallel. Opposite angles must be equal. Well, we see that 125 is the same as 125. We also see that 60 and 60, noticing that those are acute angles because they're less than 90 degrees. And 125 and 125 are obtuse angles because they're more than 90 degrees. All right, so it passes the opposite sides and the opposite angles attributes. Let's check to see about total angles. So we're going to add up 125 times 2. Notice I can multiply by 2 instead of adding them both together. So I can do 10, 4, 5, 250. And I already know that 60 plus 60 is 120, so let's do 250 plus 120 is going to equal 370. Does that equal 360? No. So again, I'm going to say even though this looks like a parallelogram, the answer is no. All right, hopefully you have all this down on your notes and snap it into your binders. You're going to move on to your problem set.